Hello everyone and welcome back to This Week in Mythic Plus. This week we have Sanguine, Grievous, and Fortified. And before we jump into exactly how to deal with these, let's go over what they do first. Sanguine leaves a pool on the floor when a non-enemy boss dies. This pool does damage to you and actually heals the enemies, so you want to move everyone out of those pools as soon as a mob goes down. Grievous affects everyone if they fall below 90% HP. So as soon as you fall below 90% HP as a result of combat damage, you will get a debuff that stacks every few seconds and takes off a percentage of your health every tick. The last affix we have this week is Fortified, which affects a non-boss enemies. They're going to have more HP and do more damage. So the tips for everyone this week is to use Fighter Chow. This will help minimize your out of combat downtime and between pull downtime. You should also be getting lock stones if you can get those lock health stones. And you should be walking into every dungeon this week with your own food or with some mana biscuits. If you know a mage, go ahead and ask them for a favor and get some conjured food before you start running Mythic Pluses. Now for tanks, this week you want to go complete survivability. This week it's all about absorption, armor, and mitigation. The amount of stamina you have this week can be sidetracked a little bit if you're going to gain a little bit of armor, a little bit of uptime on your mitigation, or an absorption trinket. Just because stamina is unaffected by Grievous since it does a percentage amount, you want to minimize the amount of damage coming in before it actually goes into your health pool. Also, the first affix this week, Sanguine, falls 100% on you, the tank, this week. Positioning is extremely important, especially since Sanguine was recently buffed. It's a little more difficult to deal with now. The keys are to not stand in any pools dropped by the enemies and to kite every mob outside of the pool. Also, make sure your melee DPSers have enough area to actually DPS these mobs. And when you're dealing with casters or ranged that are standing in pools, you have to learn how to line of sight them or run around a corner so that they follow you and actually step out of those pools. So remember, the Sanguine debuff is 100% on you. DPS. If you have a Pridas handy, this week is also a good week to toss that on. I know the large majority of weeks, depending on the affixes, Pridas is a good one. This is no different because of the Grievous debuff. It'll help you pad out your HP so that it's less likely for you to even become afflicted with that Grievous debuff. So you have to worry less about healing yourself, about carrying Fighter Chow, using Warlock Stones, if you just carry around a Pridas. Also, if your class does have the capability of self-healing, you do want to use that as efficiently as possible. So anytime you fall below 90% HP, you want to start getting your self-heal handy so that you can top yourself off, because the healers this week are really going to have to step up their game to counter Grievous. So you can do a little bit to help. One thing to help counter Sanguine is to try to AoE or cleave all of the mobs as evenly as possible so that the impact of Sanguine is minimized. Also, since 100% of the damage can't be AoE and perfectly cleaved, you do want to focus casters and ranged first since those mobs are harder to move for tanks, and melees can be focused at the end since those can be more easily positioned to avoid the Sanguine puddles. Now healers, this week, good luck. This is a very tough week for healers. What you want to do is keep your AoE heals handy. You are going to need them and use them as much as possible. This week, it's very important that you bring your own water. Whether or not you have a mage, you do want to have your own backup plan, and you will need water this week, and that's because you will be overhealing this week. You will need to keep everyone topped off. Try to keep everybody above 90% as much as you possibly can. And basically this week overhealing will happen, and that's actually what you're aiming for so that you're out of the Grievous zone. One very important thing to note that I see some healers miss out on is that when a pull actually goes down, your job is still not done. If you manage to kill all of the mobs that you pulled, but everybody's at 50% HP, you can't sit down and take a break and eat. You actually have to keep healing and top everyone off before the next pull can happen. So be aware of that just because the pull is done does not mean that your job is over. You need to make sure that you get rid of everyone's Grievous affix as soon as possible. Honestly, this week falls completely on you, the healers, so make sure you're ready to walk into that dungeon. Overall this week, I would rate it a 5 out of 10. It's not too difficult, but it's not super easy, and the biggest thing you're gonna have to deal with is healing and getting rid of the Grievous debuff. As a tank, all you have to remember is to keep moving and kiting mobs as they die and go down so that they're not standing on the Sanguine puddle. As a DPS, try to avoid as much damage as you can. Equip a Pridas if you have it, and for everyone in the team, Fighter Chow is gonna be very important. It's going to help minimize the impact on your healer And for healers, every single break that you can take to mana up is going to be very important. So be ready in between pools to take 2 or 3 sips of each drink that you have and then stand up and start healing again. The dungeons that are going to be more difficult this week are the dungeons that have mobs that are more inclined to doing AoE damage. So actually this week Upper Karazhan with each mob that does a little bit more AoE damage rather than single target is going to be a little bit more difficult. But overall, if your healer can handle all of the AoE damage that goes out and everybody gets fighter chow going for the dungeon, you should be fine. There may be 1 or 2 deaths here and there because of this week, but overall I highly suggest you run in there this week. It's not too difficult, but it's also not too easy, but that mainly falls on the heals and how comfortable he or she is with dealing with Grievous. Once again, if you like my content and want to help support the channel, go ahead and visit my Patreon down below. I'm also going to start streaming on Twitch very soon, so go ahead and give me a follow there. And as always, good luck out there.